In this video I'm going to demonstrate the soft focus 2 Photoshop action. So we're going to be using this photo here in the example. We're going to be running the action to create some cool lighting effects, and the way the action works is that the light sort of comes down from the top and tapers off as we go down the canvas. Another example here, I've just rotated the light, and I've included about 20 different color options in this action. So here's an example of another color option. So a few more examples I have here, from this to this, and that's just another color. And lastly this to that. Alright, I'm just going to close all these down and we'll start off with our base photo. So a few things just to check off before we run the action, just to make sure you don't run into any errors. So if you look into your layer panel with your photo open, just make sure that your photo layer is set as a background, so you should have that background text with the lock symbol. So if it doesn't, so for example if you open up your photo and it's called something else, you can't see that background text, just go to Layer, New, Background from Layer, sets it as the background. So still in the layer panel, just head on up to this top right hand corner icon, go to Panel Options, right down the bottom, make sure Add Copy to Copied Layers and Groups is selected, click OK. Next go to the Image menu, go to Mode, make sure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected, and that's really all we need to do. So what we need to do now is create a new layer. So go to Layer, New Layer, and this must be called Brush. So it's about like that with no capital letters. It's got a capital letter, then the action won't work at all. So click OK. So what we want to do with this brush layer selected, just hit B on the keyboard, get your brush tool out, select a color, doesn't matter what color, and you want to brush over your photo over the area that we want to keep. So rather than me just doing that, I've got one that I've already brushed over. Pretty quick, pretty crude job. You can see the edges are a bit dodgy, but I'm sure you can do a better job than that. So you can see my brush layer there has that on it. Okay, so now an important thing to keep in mind with this action is that halfway down your Photoshop document is the transition point from light to, so let me just open up this guy. So you can see in here how the light is quite strong up here. It affects our subject a lot more than the bottom half. So keep in mind your canvas size. So for example, if I wanted to have this brush area be completely centered in our canvas, so at the moment you can see there's a bit more height up top versus excuse me, down bottom. So what you can do, if I hold down Control and click on the brush layer to select it, and go Image, Crop. Okay, so now our brush layer is touching all the edges. So now I want to create more room on our canvas so that our brush area is completely centered. So if I just go to Image, Canvas Size, and what I want to do here is just flick this over to Pixels, and we want it to grow out in all directions in the width and height. Color doesn't matter because we're going to be sort of not using this background. We're going to be creating a new background that the action does. So what I want to do on the width, I might only add say 100 pixels, but in the height I might add 300. So now our brushed area is completely centered in our canvas. So this step isn't essential, it just might help optimize the results a bit more. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so before you run the action, what I recommend you do is go to Edit, Purge All. That will just clear out any strange things that Photoshop might be doing in the background that might affect the action. So just get in the habit of doing that before you run the action. Alright, this is ready to go, so I'm going to load up the action now. Go to Window, Actions, and here's the Actions panel. Top right hand corner icon, hit that one there, and go to Load Actions. Select Soft Focus 2 to ATM. Here it is here. So the action runs for about a minute. So what I'm going to do is just click play and fast forward the video, get to the result. And then I'm just going to talk about all the layers and some really cool customization techniques that you want to try out, okay? Alright, so the action's finished and you can see the result here. So what I'm going to do now is just minimize the actions panel, look into the layer panel. We have all these folders and layers. What I want to do firstly is neaten all this up. So I want to collapse all these folders. So to do that, with the folder that's selected, Soft Focus 2, just hover over the arrow, hold down Control Alt Command Option on a Mac, click that arrow. You can see everything is now collapsed and all neatened up. So we'll go from the top here. We have the brush layer still hanging around. So if you wanted to, say, run the action again, maybe you want to adjust the canvas size of our document, you could just shift select these three, delete, and there you could add a bit more width out the side or height, it's up to you. I'll just undo that. So this top layer here, sharpening, that just adds a little bit of overall sharpening to the design. You can leave that on or off. Color will come back into this folder. There's a lot of color options here that we can play around with, but we're just going to go inside the Soft Focus 2 folder, and I'm going to start from the top here, go all the way down and talk about what each one does. So I'm just going to zoom in here. Alright, so this folder here, Photo Edge Glow, if I flick this one on and off, you can see that that adds a little bit of soft glow around the edges of where we brushed. So the way this this effect works is that it's controlled mostly by this mask. So if I hold down Alt and click to go inside that mask, I'll zoom out. So wherever there's white is where that glow is going to appear. Wherever it's black, it's not going to appear. So now we get a nice tapering off from the glow being the strongest up the top to fading off down to the shadow here. So if you go inside this folder, there's three layers. If you flick them all off, you know, turn them on one by one, all they're doing is just boosting the brightness up. Alright. This one here, dust particles, you zoom back in. So by default, this is the little dots you can see that only appear in the brightest areas of your design. And by default, the opacity of this layer is set to 20%. If I click and drag on that word opacity to the right to bring it up to 100, you can see the dots a lot more. So just by default, it's really low. So if you want the dots to appear everywhere, change the blend mode of the layer from overlay to normal, and then play around with the opacity again. So now you can apply those little dots everywhere. And one thing to notice about this layer is that I've masked it to not appear within the area that we brushed. So if I hold down Shift to hide this mask, you can see that the dots appear everywhere. So I'm just going to flip this back to overlay. If you wanted more dots, what you could do is just duplicate layer, hit Control J, duplicate it, and you can move them around. Like that, you can scale them up to have bigger ones. Alright, so I'm just going to might just delete that one. So this this folder here, Reveal Normal Photo Brush Mask. If I flick this one on and off, you notice that it's not really doing anything at all. If you go inside, I've just got these two empty layers that I'm suggesting not to touch, just to leave them. So the key is with this one to use the mask, and where you want to use this mask is if you want to reveal some details in the darker areas of your photo. So say for example I want bits on his chest plate here to be much more prominent. So what I can do is grab a white brush, select the mask, I'll just adjust the brush opacity to about mid-20s, and if I start brushing into this layer, you'll see that I am bringing back a lot of the original brightness and detail in the original photo. So if I just brush everywhere down here, like that, you can see that I'm just bringing back a lot more detail back into the photo. So you just want to brush softly into areas like, for example, if I wanted to have his hand be a bit more prominent, I would just brush just a little bit there like that. You know, maybe in here, just a little bit more light. So you can sort of touch up areas that you want to be much brighter and not completely dominated by that gradient of light to dark. You can sort of adjust that with this folder mask here, so that's an important one to remember. Main photo, this one here just basically is our main photo. It's the part that's most clear. So you can see if you turn that off, then there's a few other effects which I'll talk about now, but basically you want to keep the one how it is. Don't play around with the mask too much. If I hide this mask, you'll see that it removes a lot of the blending from the atmosphere around it, so leave that on. Okay, I'm just going to zoom out again. So this layer here, darken bottom half, if I flick this one on and off, you can see this layer here is adding the darkness to the bottom half of our Photoshop document. So if I just hide the mask, you'll see that now it's applied. All it is a black layer, and now it's applied it everywhere. So this mask is just controlling where that darkness appears. So you can move this mask up and down if you want to adjust where that appears, or again, you can brush black into this mask to remove it. I'll just adjust the brightness of that brush. So again, you can brush into this layer to make areas down the bottom here a bit brighter. Or you can just play around with the opacity. By default it's 60, it's at 67, so you can just drag that down, back up, it's up to you. Alright, I'm just going to zoom back in here. Now these two important ones, if I just flick these two off, this is the light that appears from the top. So there's a few things we can do here. There's two layers. We've got top light narrow, top light wide. So that is the wide one, and that's the narrow one there. So I'll just start off with the wide one. So what we can do here, if we double click on this box, bring up the gradient fill panel, what we can do is play around with the angle here of the light. So I might want to move it, say more on, more on that angle there. And if you click on this this scale handle here, you can actually adjust the width of that light. So I can bring that in. I'm just going to leave it about there, and you can click OK. Now with this one, if you flick this one back on, it's still from the top middle, so you can actually create a second light source. So I'm just going to double click on this one, and I can adjust the angle of this light to over here. Excuse me. And I can again adjust the width. Actually, I might keep it fairly narrow. And this one, the opacity is quite low. It's at 25, so I can click and drag and adjust that opacity to bring that up. And I think if I hide this mask, so you can see if I zoom out, so again that mask is hiding where that light appears, but if you hide it, you can get that light to shine all the way through. So, but if you want more control, I can just grab a white brush and adjust the opacity of that brush, and I can just brush, a bit more light there. And I think if I bring this above this one, yeah, if I bring this layer above the main photo, it will actually shine over the entire design. So now it looks like that light's passed all the way down through our subject and down the bottom here, and this part's in the shadow. So we'll keep that on, and you can see how the dots, see how they've appeared in this area now. It's because that's where it's bright. So you can see that there. I might just bring the opacity of these down a bit. something like that. So play around with these two layers in blue. Adjust the light direction if you want, adjust the width, but just by default it's coming directly down from the top. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, so this one here, soften photo, if I flick that one on and off, you'll see in particular areas of our photo it's adding a little bit of blurring. So if I just move this layer out to the side, you'll see all it is a copy of the photo, but it's blurred, and that is appearing more around the edges of our photo to just give it an overall softened look. And this one here, photo contrast, if you adjust the opacity of this one, you see it just adds a lot more contrast to that area that has been softened. So you can just play around with the contrast of that one to sort of fine tune how that looks. Photo shadow, I'll zoom back out. So by default, if I just turn this one off, so you can see down the bottom here, that is the area that we brushed, so I'll turn that one back on. So rather with this effect, rather than having it just abruptly end like that, I've created a shadow which tapers off from the bottom, which grows out from the bottom of where we brushed and tapers off as we go down down the Photoshop document here. Okay, so keep in mind again that this one is controlled, the shadow is controlled by that mask, so it's only appearing in the bottom half, and you can adjust the opacity of that shadow. Just keep in mind that it is there. So next we have the texture folder. So if I flick this one on and off, you can see that that is creating that subtle texture you can see in the background, just helps with the overall atmospheric effect. So if you go inside, or actually firstly, the default opacity of this one's at 67, so you can crank that up to 100 if you want, but we'll just keep that around there. So if you go inside, there's a few different layers we have here, and just keep an eye on the opacity of them. I'll zoom in a bit here. So you can turn up the opacity of these layers to increase how prominent those textures are. So this one here is only at 12%, so you can slowly increase that. That one there adds a bit of a smoke effect, so you can play around with the opacity of that one. This one here I've got turned off by default. It's got add stone texture. If I turn that one on, you can see it adds a little bit of like a stone texture in the background, but I'll just turn the opacity of that up to 100 so you can see it a lot more. So it's that texture there, but it sits right in the background very subtly. You can play around with the opacity, but by default that one is off. Alright, so that's the texture folder. This one here just adds a little bit of overall noise to the design, just helps blend a lot of the lighting and textures together, but you can leave that one on or off. Okay, so moving on down, this one here, middle light, this is one you want to play around with as well. This is the light that will appear around the middle of our canvas. So around this section here, so if I flick this one on and off. So if you want to boost up the brightness around the middle, what you can do is just crank the opacity up, so you can see that there. So by default it was only about 20, so you can slowly increase that. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And if you double click on that layer, go to gradient overlay, that is, you can adjust the scale of that there. So if see when I'm playing around with that handle, it cranks up the width of that glow in the middle. So you definitely want to play around with that one as well. Alright, so and here is the background color. So if you wanted to bleed all these effects down onto your background layer, say there was, a football field behind this guy, rather than this red background that I created, then if I turn the background color layer off, we would see that football ground in the background, and all these lighting effects would just sit on top. So keep that in mind. Alright, so what I want to do now is go back up into the color folder and show you what we can do in here. So we'll go straight into these because these are the fun ones. So by default, color option 1 is turned on. So all you're going to do with these folders is go down and flick the visibility on for those layers, just like that. And there's a whole heap of different, well, there's 20 different subtle color variations that can help you recolor your design. So let's just go with this one to start off with. But what you can also do is just blend them together. So when you've picked one, you can actually keep flicking more on. Okay, so I'm just going to, we'll go for the blue theme. And what I'm doing there is just adjusting, you can adjust the opacity of that folder. So let's flick on another one. So say for example, this one I don't want it at 100%, so I can just click on the word opacity, drag to the left, and I can slowly start dragging to the right to bring in the opacity of that effect. So you can keep flicking all these different folders on and off to build a look that you want. So I'm just going to play around with a few more. That's not bad, but I don't want to use it 100%, so I'm just going to add a little bit of blue in. That's kind of cool. Just added a little bit of red to the highlights, I noticed. So you can see just from flicking around with these colors, these folders, it's made a huge difference to the design. Okay, so that's those. You want to spend a while in here and make sure you're getting your colors right. So going back up to the top here, you can use this layer to adjust the overall brightness of the design. So I might just turn this down a little bit, make it brighter in areas like that. Overall contrast, this is an interesting one. I've highlighted this in yellow because if I adjust the opacity of this, by default 70, if I bring it to 0, you'll see that it's made a huge difference, and that's at 100. So what you can do, is just play around with the opacity of this. So just drag this handle and you can see it makes a huge difference to the overall contrast, makes it look a lot more cinematic. So just play around with that. I'll leave it about there. Overall saturation, if you think the colors are a bit dull, a bit flat, you can just double click on this one, turn up the saturation like that. You don't want to go too high, it starts like that, starts bringing in some banding. So I actually don't mind it a bit dull, I think it works for this photo, but definitely want to play around with that saturation level. If you just want to use a single color, flick the eye on for this layer and it will just fill the entire design with the one color. So if you want black and white, just turn it into, just drag it over into this corner. And what you might also want to do, if you want to say add a bit more, say if I wanted to add a bit of brown to this design but not completely dominate, again just play around with the opacity, start at 0 and slowly drag to the right. You can see how it's, that brown's starting to come in. So that's another way you can play around with the colours. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to do some touch-ups. So I just want to go back into here and I might want to add a bit more so what I might do, I might grab this darkened bottom half and I might brush some white into this layer because I want to add a bit more shadow into this corner because we've got this light passing down through the middle here, so I want it to be a little bit darker through here. I'm just going to play around with the overall, I'm just going to zoom out and play around with the overall opacity of this so we can reveal where's that shadow? No, we'll leave it about there. Okay, so what I want to do now is add a bit more glows to the highlights of our photo. So what I'm going to do is just between these two files I'm going to create a new layer and I'm going to set the blend mode to screen. I'm going to grab a white brush because I just want to add some subtle glows over the hot spots of our photo. So hit B, get the brush tool out. I'm going to adjust the opacity to low 20s. What I'm going to do is just move my mouse over these hot spots, and I'm just going to brush a little bit of white so you can see. So the light's coming down through here, so I really want to hit these areas. Or I'm just going to adjust the opacity down to 12% of that brush, and brush on. If you want to adjust the size of your brush, just use the square brackets, so like that, so I can move in and out. So there's light coming down through here, it's passing through here, so we can add a bit more glows through here. Might actually crop our canvas size as well, so I'm just going to hit M on the keyboard, get a marquee tool out. I'm just going to drag around here. I think there's just too much space at the bottom. Image crop, just like that, so that's looking pretty good. And now what I might do is create another hot spot of light up the top here. So I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to set it to screen again. I'm just going to brush a hot spot up here. So play around with creating those layers, set the blend mode to screen. And another tip, what you might want to do is do a little bit of dodging and burning to really fine tune our design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge this entire design onto one layer. So instead of having all these folders and layers, I'm just going to have our design on one layer. So if I'm just going to select the sharpening layer here, hold down Control, Alt, Shift and E, and now we have the entire design on one layer like that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a little bit of dodging and burning. So if I just go over here and select our dodge tool, because I want to bump up some of the highlights, the detail in the highlights here. So I'm going to change the range to highlights, see what this looks. I'll leave the exposure pretty high. So if I start brushing over these highlights, you can see that I can boost the brightness like that. So that's a bit too strong, so you can adjust the exposure if you want it to be a bit lighter. So you can really get in there and adjust the brightness of areas through there. So now there's a strong hit of light here. You might want to, I'm just going to create another layer again, set it to screen. So now you might want to brush a tiny little bit of light where, what I might do, I might bring this under here. Oh no, I won't. Yeah, just grab a little bit of, brush a little bit of light. I'm just going to adjust the opacity. So just really subtle effects, but it can make a big difference to the overall design. Alright, so what you can do as well, you can grab your burn tool. There it is here. And you can burn, say, the mid-tones. So if there's an area you want to be darker, you can just burn that away. But what I might do is try the shadows. Oh, so I'm selected the wrong layer. So yeah, so if I now brush away, I can darken the image where I want. So if I change this to the mid-tones, see, like through stomach there, I can like make all that a lot darker. But yeah, you can change the color range, so you can set it to highlights as well, flatten the highlights a bit more. But just yeah, get in there, merge the design onto one layer and play around with fine tuning it as much as you can. Okay, so that is it. I'm just going to show you what we had originally, what you can do with this action, create designs really fast. So what we got? So there's our original, and we created that really with no effort at all, just playing around with a couple layers, choosing, experimenting with different color options. If you have any troubles with it, just send me an email. Thanks.